Yellow, this is Hannah, I'm Dallas, and these are comic books. And right here in front of me on this table, I have a huge array of comic books, my personal collection, some extras. We're gonna talk comic books today. Do you collect them? Should you be collecting them? Etc., etc., etc. Stick around. So here's what I want to do before we talk about comic books in general and talk about my collection today. I want to talk about your comic book collection that you either have or have had. Do you collect comic books? Have you ever wanted to collect comic books? If space and money were no issue, what series would you want to collect? I just want, right now here before the video, a generalized answer from you guys. What do you collect? Or what do you want to collect? Hannah, do you collect comic books?
I do not.
Have you ever read a comic book? You had to have at some point.
I'm sure I did, but it was never something that was on my radar.
Yeah, it's not something, no judgment. A lot of people don't read comic books. I will say it's been many years since I read a comic book. Probably when we met in college, I read a handful of comic books there. And I'll talk about that in a second, because I read them in a very different manner than I'm used to. But have you ever had any interest in comic books? Is there one that, like, if we had a week off and there was a stack of them there, you might pick them up? Or are you just not into them at all?
I think that the art is really cool and the concepts are really interesting, but as far as like being just so excited to pick one up and try to read it, no.
Okay, well, that's okay, because I think as we go through some of these comic books that I'm going to tell you about here in a bit that I read as a kid, maybe we can see them through your eyes and you can tell me if it invokes any interest at all, or if you're still just like, nah. But I want to talk about how I read comic books a little bit in college, because it was very interesting, and I think it'll lead to a bigger conversation at large just about comic books in general. When we were in college, someone handed me a thumb drive with software on it that was a reader for comic books, as well as pretty much the whole collection. Come over here and check this out. These Green Arrow comic books. Now, this might not be from that set, but the ones that I read in college, we're talking hundreds of comic books on a reader. I read them on my MacBook, and I thought that was the best thing ever. There's a couple reasons why I thought it was the best thing ever. A, because look at this collection on this table. Get a nice wide view of that if you can. It's a lot. It's a lot of space, and it's heavy. Look at this box. Look at me right here. That's actually some pretty light reading. If you're an avid comic book reader, that box right there is lightweight. You can buzz right through that if you're used to reading comic books. So whenever I was in college, there was no way to put too many comic books under the bed. Space was limited in a dorm, so I ended up, at that point in my life, reading them digitally. So I'm kind of curious what you guys think about that in the comments below, too. Does physical comic books, is that what matters? And does reading them digitally, does that take the magic away? There's a certain aspect to it that I think it does. And we'll get into that a little bit when we talk about my collection here, because here in front of me, look at all these. These are all comic books I've had since I was a kid. I bought some of these in this stack. I had to have been 8 or so, 8 years old. So there's magic there. I've read all of these front to back a dozen times. And I don't know if I'd be drawn to coming back to reading them, because honestly, it's not the story I remember. It's the adventure of buying them. It's the adventure of collecting them. It's the adventure of putting them in these sleeves that I think draws me back to them. I read them because I have them and I cherish them. So there's two sides of that. Do you read comic books because you just love the stories, or do you read comic books because some part of you is like a collector and you just want more? Honestly, for me, I think I lean toward the latter, right? I think I actually like reading them because I like having them, and I like having them in my hands, which is why, even since I found out that you can order and read most comic books now digitally in one form or another, like they'll sell them to you that way, I still don't go buy them. I think it's just because, for me personally, as a person who loves Pokemon and loves the physical cards, etc., etc., I think personally I just want to hold them, and if I can't, for me, it doesn't matter. So I can't really have a conversation with you about that because you don't care either way, really. But I do want to know what you guys think about that kind of thing. I'll be very curious if we have anyone in the audience who is or was an avid collector but has turned their reading to be more digital. Because if you do like the stories and you do like keeping up, it's a good option.
Well, I wondered if it was a good thing to have the digital thing because sometimes it might be hard to get your hands on some comics.
Well, I had to think kind of hard about that. I think for some people, yes, that could be the case. There's always going to be really hard to get comic books like those early issues of Spider-Man and Batman, but even with those, they reprint comic books a ton. So yes and no, but maybe more so than, oh, it's easier to get my hands on those harder to get ones, it's easier to get a larger volume. If you right now wanted to go read an entire series of Green Arrow, or if you wanted to read this entire series, okay, you're either going to a comic book store and compiling them all, you're most likely going to go to a bookstore and you're going to buy a trade, a big, thick compilation of a whole series or a whole story run. But now with digital comic books, it's even easier. You just kind of pay for some digital copy in some bookstore or whatever, however you get your digital comic books, you have the whole thing. So more than hard to get, it's a way to read a lot more without the journey, which again, back to my original point, I kind of hate that, you know?
Yeah.
I kind of, these are beautiful, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's a good point though. But I do want to bring up a point with these comic books right here. A huge turnoff for me with comic books back in the late 90s and early 2000s is when this kind of thing was rampant. You see how there's two copies of it? This is the same comic book.
Oh, really?
Yes, exact same comic book. And I have two of what I think was 4 or 5 copies. They came in every color of the rainbow or something. And if you wanted to have a complete collection, when the first one came out, you had to go buy all of them. So it's just, I mean, Pokemon does this thing too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Pokemon makes these multiples. You go, oh, this Pokemon set has 175 cards in it. Psych, every single card in there has 2 editions. So now you've doubled the number. Oh, and here's some promo cards of the same edition. And it goes on and on. And I let Pokemon get away with it because I love it so much. But I hated that when it happened with comic books. So
because the collector in you was like, I have to have them all.
Yeah, because that's how
I don't need it.
That's how I am. But like even right now, I'm sitting here and I'm just wishing I had this whole set on a shelf. Which this does need to go in my game room, and I've long thought about this. I need a display shelf for this series because it's so near and dear to my heart, right? But if I want to do that, I'm either getting on eBay or I'm going to go to the comic book stores and hunt them all down again. So as for that part of the conversation, I'm curious to what you guys think. Again, it's really the same question, physical, digital, but, you know, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about I'm sure there's going to be people that are watching, they're like, well, yeah, I used to collect comic books, but it got too crazy because nowadays stories intermingle. To get all the story, you're going to have to go read the Teen Titans to get the other half of the story, and it really just turns into a big, I have to buy 600 comic books to read this. So that's honestly, and this is one of my bigger points, and this is what I'm getting to, I don't collect comic books currently. This is actually my childhood collection sitting here in front of us, plus a few extras. Actually, some of these Spider-Mans are from someone that sent them to our PO box on our main channel, and that gift was actually what inspired this video, so we'll talk about a couple of those. But right now, I want to talk about the fact that I don't collect comic books, but I'm thinking about getting back into it for a couple of different reasons. A, I think it will make some great content for this channel, this new channel that we have. I think it would be some great stuff. We could do some live comic book hunting at some point to maybe go get the other set of these. Wouldn't that be pretty cool? We could, I don't know, we could just do some in-depth dives on some complete series because, hey, I'm trying to get a shot of this. This is this is kind of hard to explain, but this is actually all but 2 or 3 issues of the new Teen Titans. This gets a little bit complicated because they actually just kind of kept starting this series over. So there's like a run of the new Teen Titans from a certain date here. Don't know how hard it's going to be able to see, but all these comic books kind of have a date stamped in them. So, okay, yeah, 1988. I don't know the exact dates, okay, but there's another run of this exact same story in like 92. Same title. And honestly, I think this is the older one, and that's the newer one. Maybe. 86, 88. Maybe the previous one is way prior. So yeah, this is even earlier than that, like 82 or something. So this comic book right here, this actually needs to be put aside because this is not part of this series that I actually collect. I just happen to buy the older ones when I do come across them. But I've been collecting this very specific run of the new Teen Titans since I was, I was probably 10 when I bought the first one at a local comic book store, and I've just ever since, I've cataloged which ones I have, and I go to another comic book store and I see if they have an issue that I don't have. And I've bought those all over the United States, and I'm just 4 or 5 away now. It's the only comic book series I have that's close to completion. And so I say that to say, I think I'm going to get back into collecting and actually try to, for the sake of these videos and this channel, try to complete that. And
They're not expensive, though.
No, because that series isn't old. Matter of fact, I almost made a big mistake. I took that whole collection to a store here well before we had either of our YouTube channels, and I tried to trade it in for some video games and stuff, and they wouldn't take a single copy.
Really?
Yeah, that's definitely the kind of series that ends up in the 25-cent, or some comic book stores you can go to and fill a box like this for $20, whatever, with a certain set of comic books and whatever you get, and that stuff's in there. And
this
honestly,
is just a series that you happened to like when you were a kid.
Well, no, you know what happened? I'll give you a little story, a little background on the comic book collecting I did. I had piano lessons about 4 blocks from my house, up 2 blocks, over 2 blocks, little building there. But across the street from that building that the piano lessons were in was a comic book gaming buy, sell, trade store. And they had a thing where you bring 2 comic books, 2 for 1.
Gotcha.
And so every single week when I'd go to my piano lessons, I'd go do that. I'd go take 2 comics. Sometimes I'd buy a couple. A few weeks later, I'd trade them back in and get more. And for whatever reason, I had some money to spend one day, and I went in there. I had to be 10, 12 years old, maybe a little younger. There was like 10 of those. And it was probably the first time that in my life I'd seen 10 or 20 of the same comic book all in one place. Because this place didn't have a large comic book. They had a few up on the wall, and you guys that shop for comic books are going to know what I'm talking about, where, you know, there were $100, $200 comic books, really special editions, but otherwise they had junk comics in one specific end cap in this store. And so something in my brain, the early collector in me, as you see, something in my brain just went by, and I think I had $10 to spend. I think I went home with a backpack full of that comic book, and just from then on out, it was like, let's complete it. So we can kind of get a deeper look here. Don't get too confused. You're going to see a couple different editions. So you see these in the top right-hand corner, and these are actually older. These are an older set, but like I said, I just was too obsessed. I still bought them anyways. And then this is back into this set, and they're all out of order, so some of you neat freaks are probably going to get mad at me. And some of these are special editions, but I'm telling you, I have most of it. You can definitely read this whole series linearly and not miss too much because of the issues that I am missing. And I'm very proud of this. And I'm very proud that despite trying, I've actually been able to keep this collection and not miss out on it. So I'll be interested to hear also. Like I said, guys, I really want a big discussion about comic books here. Oh, we found another color! Woo. You know what? There's probably more in here. Oh, we found the lime green yellow. That's crazy. It's in there. I actually had no intention of making this video just a couple days ago. Like I said, we got sent some of these comic books, and I was like, it's time to make some comic book content. Because on our normal channel, we really wouldn't get much traction doing this sort of thing. So I just got them out just now. This is how they were put away. Well, kind of how they were put away. They were put away neatly in a box, but they weren't in order. Some of these are in order. I'm kind of recognizing the order now. But I'll be curious to hear if any of you guys collect like this. Is there one thing that you keep and then you just kind of read whatever else you get your hands on? Because I think if I had to categorize myself as a comic book collector, I would put myself in that category. I've got something that I keep, and I would say moving forward, no, I dropped it. I would say moving forward with this channel, I'm going to officially consider myself a collector of this series, Batman Legends of the Dark Knight. I want to complete that bad boy. I've got about 10, 15 issues of it here. It's some darn good reading, I'm telling you. And then I'm going to also consider myself a collector of this new Teen Titans set, this specific run. I'm going to finish those out, and we're going to make some content around that in the future. So also maybe comment below and let us know if you're excited about that. Can you tell I'm trying to get you to talk to me here? That's the conversation I wanted to have. So we're going to leave the conversation at that, and then we are going to run through the rest of my collection a little bit just so I can fawn over some of this stuff that I'm really nostalgic for. So if you were here for the conversation and some factual nonsense, whatever, you can leave. But for right now, let's talk about some comic books I love. So, you've heard me talk about this. I know you're not going to know what this is right here, but I know you've heard me talk about it. I always talk about this Batman series that is just near and dear to my heart, and it has these 3 parts. Basically, long story short, I'll make this as short as I can. Bruce Wayne is kind of set up, and he's forced to do all this crazy stuff. Bane ends up breaking his back because he's so tired out, and then Batman's debilitated for a whole series, and someone else is Batman, and then there's a whole series where he comes back. So it's Night, what is it? Night, yeah, I forget which order they go in. So Night Quest, that's not Bruce Wayne, right? That's not Bruce Wayne. It's some other dude in a suit. And Night's End is where Batman is going to come back. And I think that's some of the best Batman there is in the world, that Night's End. I don't think I have any from the set, but yeah, Nightfall is where Batman is basically led to his death and he's messed up. Bane breaks his back. So there's 3 series. Batman getting messed up, Batman being gone, Batman coming back. And I never really wanted to collect that series per se, but I loved it so much, and I read novelized versions of it, etc., etc. And so anytime while I was collecting them, I came across those, I would buy them. But this whole series, especially Night Quest, is so long. There's so many in that series. I don't want to take up the space it would have to take that. But if you ever get a chance to read Nightfall, read it. I love it. I also have, there's some more here, Nightfall. I also have most of this series. It's not all out of the box, but it's a series called War Games. And basically the reason that I'm nostalgic for this is because there was a period in, I don't know exactly, it was probably high school, where I hadn't read comic books in several years. I went to a game store, was convinced to buy this new series that was coming out, and I bought every issue. It was a few months that a whole series came out. Basically, there's a huge gang war in Gotham, and Batman's responsible for it happening because his Robin at the time, or something along these lines, causes a gang war to break out because she stole Batman's notes on how to achieve some master goal that Batman might have. See how complicated this gets? I know. Hannah's standing there going cross-eyed. But it's a good series, so I have that too. And then, some of this is a little confusing because there's some things here that were in that set of comic books that the person sent us to our PO box. So just in case you want to put your eyeballs on them, there's some awesome editions of Web of Spider-Man and the Amazing Spider-Man. So just so you can look at them. These were not from my childhood collection. Spider-Man Unlimited, that's beautiful. Mysterio is one of my favorite villains. And there's a few older editions in here I'm excited to kind of thumb through. These were all a gift, and I think it's just nuts. I'm so just happy to have them. But that was that. Here is something that was part of my childhood. A huge part of my childhood. And I know you heard me talk about this too. It's so funny we're doing this on video because I'll randomly start talking about stuff from my childhood and she'll just be like, well, that sounds cool.
That's nice.
But there was a series of comic books in like the 90s where they kind of re-envisioned a bunch of superheroes, kind of flipped the script on them and made it way in the future. So you might remember like Spider-Man 99 from the 90s cartoon, or you might remember the little end scene on the new Sony Spider-Man cartoon movie. What's it called?
Amazing Spider... No,
How am I blanking on this?
Into the Spider-Verse.
Into the Spider-Verse. And it looks like there's like a spoiler at the end of it, and it looks like they might be going to 2099, which I think would be super awesome and I would approve of. But where that came from is they basically took a bunch of heroes and villains. Doom is a villain, and Ravage, and there's another Ravage. So I collected a bunch of these, and here's just a few of them. Like, so there's issue number 1, something I'm very proud to own. Not that these are terribly, there's Ghost Rider 2099, and all of these have a weird story why that superhero's either back or someone else is that Superman. So there's the X-Men one, more Ravage, and there's a little book for just 2099 in general. And that was a huge part of my childhood, something I'm very fond of. This is another one that was sent to our P.O. box in that stack of comic books. And this is actually the 3rd installment, if you will, in a series of comic books by Frank Miller. And I think it's the best thing on earth. The original Dark Knight that he wrote, go read it. I don't know what else to tell you. Google Frank Miller Dark Knight. I actually haven't read this, so it's supposed to be like the latest installment in what he wrote, because he wrote a couple different segments of it really spread out, and this is even more so. Like, he wrote this a long time after the first 2, so I just want to bring that up to say I've read that 1,000 times, the original ones. So the last thing I think I could talk about here is some Daredevil comic books, though I don't own anywhere near as many as I used to, because my Daredevil comic books I used to own were actually semi-valuable. So I did at one point sell a bunch of the ones that I had, but I've probably read more Green Arrow and more Daredevil comic books than anything, because that's my favorite DC and Marvel characters. So there's some Daredevil I had from my youth. The last ones I haven't gotten rid of, but I still don't really plan on collecting that stuff again anymore. Because again, I don't think from here on out I'm going to be a diehard collector. I'm going to collect just enough to tickle my fancy and to supply some content for this channel. So before we wrap this up, comment below and let me know what kind of comic book content you might like to see in the future. I definitely want to know how many comic book nerds we have out there that are watching. I want to know. I want to know what you guys think. Comic book content's not something we're going to do a lot of, but we're going to do a little bit. Definitely going to. We do video game hunting on our other channel, and I've said since we started this one to Hannah, I don't really want to do any hunting on this channel. But I'm hoping to maybe befriend a local comic book store or something and actually be able to go to their store and make some content with them. In the same way, I want to find some local card game stores, and hopefully they'll let me come film there with permission and make some cool content there, both about comic books and card games and stuff, respectively. So chat about that with me in the comments below before we get out of here. Tell me what you think. And also, you can go over to our Discord. There's a link for that below. And have an even deeper, that's so funny. I don't know if you're going to hear that, but my Discord just dinged. That was pretty awesome. Good timing there, Discord. But you can have a deeper conversation over there on our Discord with us and talk more about comic books, etc., etc., etc. It's a good place to be. About 1,000 members or 700. We're moving towards 1,000 members over there. So come join us, talk about Pokemon cards, comic books, all that stuff has to do with our channels. And it's a good time. That's going to be it. Anything else before we get out of here? Are you? Let's finish the conversation we started. Are you swayed? Did you see anything? Would you let me read you some comic books?
Sure,
Okay.
But I feel like that's a visual thing. You gotta actually like look at it.
Yeah, you got to. Like you can't just hear it out loud. I guess you could narrate it, but I'd be like describing Batman's poses and stuff.
And then he approached.
Batman stands in a brooding fashion.
That could be great.
You guys, here's a good one. Comment below and tell Hannah what comic book she should read. You do own a Xena comic book, I think it might be issue number 1, so maybe you should read it, see how it tickles your fancy, and then maybe we'll go buy you issue number 2 if you like it.
Maybe, yeah.
So definitely hit that subscribe button to maybe come back for the next future comic book episodes that we do and see if she's progressed any, or if she's just gonna live in the mud, the no comic book.
I feel like the world of comics is just like, you know, superheroes and villains and taking on evil, and I'm just like,
I mean, that's definitely most of it. There's certainly some comic books out there and some graphic novels and stuff that's not the case. But that's not what this video is about. Guys, thanks for hanging out with us. Chat comic books with us down below. Come back for the next video. And until that next video, peace out.